Everyone's heard of Hitler's Germany being called the Third Reich. Sounds dramatic. Cinematic, even. But here's a question no one asks. If that was the third, where the hell were the first and second? Turns out, yeah, they were real. What about the Second Reich? Easy. Borders, Berlin, Kaiser, shiny helmets, the whole imperial package. But what is called the First Reich? Welcome to the Holy Roman Empire, a political mutant that somehow lasted for 800 years without ever fully figuring out what it was. A German empire, called Roman, a state that looks like a spilled plate of ravioli on the map, and also emperors that got elected. What is this, Eurovision? Anyway, welcome to History Night. Today we're diving into the original Reich. It's messy, confusing, borderline absurd, and absolutely brilliant. This barbarian dares to call himself emperor of the Romans and Franks, and wants to marry his son to my daughter? Is he out of his mind? Tell your... What was his name? Otto? Tell him this. There's only one emperor, and he's standing right in front of you. Now kindly, get lost. Roughly like that, the Byzantine Emperor Nikephoros Phocas welcomed Otto the Great's envoy. Diplomacy. 10th century edition. See, Otto was just your average king of Germany until the year 962, when he marched into Rome, cleaned up a papal mess, and got himself crowned emperor by the Pope. Classic help me, then I crown you exchange. Standard Vatican service. From Otto's point of view, this wasn't a power grab. It was a legacy. He saw himself as the next chapter after the Roman emperors and Charlemagne. Continuation, not imitation. Now here's the twist. The Byzantines, the actual Eastern Roman Empire, didn't call themselves Byzantines at all. They called themselves Romaioi, as in Romans. In their eyes, they were the real deal. The term Byzantium was total rebrand, cooked up in the 16th century by German historian Hieronymus Wolff, basically to make sure no one confused the dead empire in the East with the empire he lived in. The Holy Roman Empire. That's the power move. Kill your rival, rename him, and claim the legacy. And that's where our story starts. This so-called empire has gone by more names than a medieval conman with a forged family crest. In different centuries, it was the Christian Empire, then just the Kingdom. Like that clarified anything. By the 10th century, it rebranded to the Holy Empire, then upgraded to the Holy Roman Empire, and by the 15th century, for extra confusion, slapped on, of the German nation. The Germans gave up pretending they still controlled Italy and decided to own what was left. At its biggest, the empire stretched across chunks of more than 10 modern European countries. The borders were constantly shifting. It was a cartographer's nightmare. The plan was to create a strong, centralized superstate, a kind of medieval EU with more swords and fewer committees. But the result looked like a chaotic sprawl of duchies, bishoprics, counties, free cities, and rogue abbots all playing Game of Thrones. Half the time, the emperor was just a guy with a fancy title and zero real power. And if that wasn't messy enough, there were imperial cities like Hamburg and Bremen, and even imperial villages that answered directly to the emperor, because why not? One observer in the 10th century called it a monstrous, deformed body, and honestly, that's the most accurate job description any emperor ever got. Modern historians are still arguing about what it even was. Some call it a confederative union. Others, a shifting complex of lands. Wikipedia, a unique political entity. And some just give up and go. Yeah, sure, let's call it a state. Whatever it was big, weird, and somehow very, very real. For a long time, the spiritual heart of the empire was exactly where you'd expect. Rome. In the medieval mindset, divine authority flowed straight from the eternal city. That's where the Pope crowned emperors, at least until the 10th century. But here's the thing. The relationship between popes and emperors wasn't some sacred brotherhood. It was more like a medieval custody battle. Who gets to be in charge of who? Things went nuclear in the late 11th century with the infamous investiture controversy. On one side, Pope Gregory VII. On the other, Emperor Henry IV. The issue? Who gets to appoint bishops? The Pope or the Emperor? Simple question. Explosive answer. Long story short, Henry lost. If you know which snowy Italian city he had to crawl to and beg forgiveness in, drop it in the comments. We'll know you're one of the real ones. Meanwhile, Italy turned into a civil war playground. On one side, the Guelphs, loyal to the Pope. On the other, the Ghibellines, backing the emperor. Family dinners got awkward real fast. And where was the capital? Yeah, about that. See, some empires have a capital. The Holy Roman Empire had a travel itinerary. Emperors didn't rule from a throne. They wandered, court and all, from castle to castle like medieval rock stars on tour. Temporary palaces, temporary cities, temporary everything. More than a dozen cities claim to be the capital. Here are just a few of the empire's greatest hits. Aachen, Charlemagne's old stomping ground where German kings got crowned. Vienna, the Habsburg HQ from the 15th century. Lots of wigs, even more politics. Frankfurt, post-Rome. This is where the emperors got picked and crowned. Regensburg, home of the Reichstag, imperial parliament, from 1663. Think of it as the empire's never-ending meeting. Prague, the emperor's pop-up residence 2 times, because why not? Bottom line, it had many capitals and no real center. Bureaucracy before GPS. Now, about those elections. Yes, you heard that right. This empire ran on votes, not bloodlines. The Holy Roman Emperor had to win the crown, not inherit it. Medieval democracy, but make it elite. Since the 10th century, the power to choose the emperor belonged to 7 prince-electors. Some were nobles, some were high-ranking clergy. All of them had egos the size of provinces. Technically, they didn't vote for an emperor. They elected the King of the Romans, which sounds like a WWE title, but was actually just a placeholder until the Pope did his crowning ceremony. Unless, of course, the emperor skipped that part entirely and just called himself elected emperor, which, let's be honest, is peak Holy Roman Empire energy. And if you're wondering who usually got picked, it was the emperor's son, because nothing says free election like dad rigging the vote before he dies. But let's be honest, the Holy Roman Empire had bigger problems than just where to put the throne, like the fact that it was an empire in name only. Let's take a look at its greatest hits. No unified army. Every duke, bishop, and baron had his own little militia. Good luck coordinating that. No financial system. The empire couldn't even collect taxes properly. No single legal code. Laws varied wildly from one village to the next. What was a crime in one place might earn you a medal in another. Then came Maximilian I, who looked at this chaos and said, "Yeah, I can fix this." He couldn't. He tried to centralize things, modernize the system, and the imperial diet, basically a medieval version of a meeting that never ends, said nope. Every reform was blocked like a bad group chat. In Latin, emperors were called Caesars. Classy, Roman, legacy approved. But as German replaced Latin, the title evolved into Kaiser. Same imperial vibe, just with more umlauts. And the eagle? Oh, they were obsessed. It started with a single-headed eagle, borrowed straight from Roman iconography. Later, because this empire always had to be extra, they upgraded to a double-headed eagle. Twice the heads, twice the drama. You can still see that bird today, mutated but recognizable, in the coats of arms of modern Germany and Austria. black eagle, red claws, gold background. They've been rocking those colors since the 10th century. Basically the proto-version of the German flag. Then came the Reformation, and the empire broke in half. What had been a clumsy, oversized mess now became a religious battlefield. Suddenly, it wasn't just duchy against duchy. It was Catholics against Protestants, with the empire stuck in the middle like an exhausted parent. In 1555, they slapped on a temporary patch: the Peace of Augsburg. It made Lutheranism officially legal and gave local rulers the right to choose their territory's faith. The deal was simple: whose realm, his religion. Sounds great on parchment, but it didn't last. By the next century, the whole system fell apart like soggy parchment in a thunderstorm. What followed was the 30 Years' War, an European-scale nightmare that made the empire ground zero for chaos. This war was a population-leveling catastrophe. Entire towns wiped off the map. The empire lost almost half its people. Think about that. Half. And after that, the Catholic coalition, led by the Holy Roman Empire, lost the war. The Habsburgs' dream of uniting Christendom under one shiny crown was dead and buried. German historian Volker Press nailed it with this line: "The Treaty of Westphalia turned the empire into an empire of princes, with the emperor as just the first among equals." In modern literature, Daniel Kehlmann dropped a little Easter egg into the madness. He imagined the trickster Till Eulenspiegel, a medieval prankster, part clown, part social critic, wandering the ruins of the empire during the 30 Years' War, which honestly feels right. That's exactly the kind of setting where a chaotic jester makes more sense than a crown. By the early 15th century, a new kind of drama was brewing. Not religious, but dynastic. Austria against Prussia. Two powerhouses, two families, one massive ego contest. The Habsburgs ruled Austria. The Hohenzollerns ruled Prussia. They weren't fighting only over land, but also for cultural dominance. Who gets to define what it means to be German? And here's the kicker: not even all their land was technically inside the empire. The Habsburgs, for their part, started looking outward. They tried carving out their own space in Eastern and Southern Europe, areas where they didn't need to get elected to rule, where their crowns weren't just ceremonial props. But then there was Silesia, a prize both dynasties wanted. Prussia snatched it from Austria in not one, not two, but 3 separate wars. And somehow, it still remained officially part of the Holy Roman Empire. Because of course it did. During the 7 Years' War, Voltaire, never one to miss a chance for a good roast, delivered the ultimate insult. This body, which calls itself the Holy Roman Empire, was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. Brutal. And yes, this is the second time someone in this episode has called it a body. Maybe because by this point, that's all it was. A bloated, half-functioning relic with a crown on top. And then came Napoleon. The man who didn't just end empires, he collected them. In 1804, he did the most Napoleon thing possible, declared himself Emperor of the French. Self-crowned, of course, because waiting for a pope is for amateurs. A few months later, Francis II Habsburg, head of the already half-functioning Holy Roman Empire, looked at that move and went, "Fine, 2 can play that game." And he declared himself Emperor of Austria. Now we had a double Kaiser situation. 1 man, 2 crowns, and about 0 authority left in the original empire. Then Napoleon casually marched into Vienna, and Francis, surprise, ran. The 2 finally squared off at Austerlitz, aka the Battle of the 3 Emperors. Napoleon, Francis, Alexander I of Russia. And if you count Francis's 2 titles separately, Technically 4 emperors. Guess who won? Yep, Napoleon. After that, he created the Confederation of the Rhine, a hand-picked group of German states now under French protection. They all declared, "We're done with the empire," and slammed the door behind them. Napoleon gave Francis a final choice: abdicate or face a new war. Francis knew the score. On August 6, 1806, he officially pulled the plug. "We consider the bond that united us with the German imperial state to be broken. We consider the title and honor of imperial headship to have lost their force. And we release all imperial subjects from their duties." Translation: The Holy Roman Empire is dead. No more Reich. No more Kaisers. Just a very old dream, dissolved by French cannons and Austrian paperwork. You might have caught the term German Empire floating around earlier. By the late 15th century, the full title, Holy Roman Empire of the German Nation, started quietly disappearing from official documents. Even the empire itself was like, yeah, let's maybe not call it that anymore. The writing was on the wall. After 800 years, the end was inevitable. It was a leftover from a time when people thought kings were chosen by God, and land could be governed through parchment and family trees. By the time nationalism and revolutions showed up, the Holy Roman Empire looked completely useless. But empires never just end. They mutate. At the Congress of Vienna, once Napoleon had been dealt with, Europe's elites stitched together a new creature, the German Confederation, a loose alliance of German-speaking states. Basically, the old empire's shadow, now without the pretense of unity. It still featured the two familiar heavyweights, the Austrian Empire, ruled by the same old Habsburgs, the Kingdom of Prussia, under the Hohenzollerns, and sure enough, the rivalry came back. Austria versus Prussia, round 2. But this time, the gloves were off. It wasn't about titles anymore. It was about who gets to build the next German empire. Spoiler alert, Prussia won. In 1871, they created the Second Reich, a new, centralized German empire built on iron, blood, and Bismarck's mustache. But that's a different story.